On October 17th at 5:04 p.m., life took a dramatic turn for millions of Northern Californians. The 7.1 quake of '89 wasn't the big one that many were warned about, but it was powerful enough to destroy scores of homes, businesses, major roadways, take lives, and leave emotional scars that will last a lifetime. Now, some people were prepared. They had an earthquake plan, but most were caught off guard. The people who were prepared say that planning gave them confidence and helped ease their fears. To get ready for an earthquake, it helps to understand what they are and where they can strike. California has a reputation for being earthquake country, but other parts of the United States are prime targets also. More than 1,000 quakes have been reported east of the Mississippi since 1700, and there has been severe damage in South Carolina, Missouri, and Montana. Earthquakes can happen anywhere that land shifts.
Very important point to make, that people in the East don't really worry about it, but there have been many historic earthquakes in the East. They're not prepared for it as well as we are in California. They should really work on this.
When an earthquake occurs is some kind of large shift in the Earth's crust. And we know now that the Earth's surface consists of a number of large or rigid plates that move around relative to one another. The inside of the Earth is hot. As that hot material rises, it spreads these plates apart. They grind alongside of each other. But periodically, the strength of the rock is finally exceeded by that force or that stress, and the rocks break. And when that break occurs, the Earth shakes. And the initial breakage comes from a point we usually plot as the epicenter, which is the point of first breakage, and then it is directed out in all directions.
The study of earthquakes is not new. The Chinese have records that date back 3,000 years. But each new quake provides new information. Scientists still have a lot to learn about why and where they happen. And it will still be a while before earthquake alerts are issued, like tornado or hurricane warnings.
It was the largest one to hit the Bay Area in 83 years, yet there was no indications to the great bulk of the population, including the geologists, that this quake was coming.
There have been some successful predictions. However, it's still in the research stage, not ready for routine application. We are hopeful that in the future there will be short-term predictions, which are on the time scale of hours to a few days, and that's what most people think of as a prediction. What I'd like to emphasize is that we are doing predictions in long-term time scales of decades, and those have been extremely important because they've provided opportunities to focus our efforts on preparedness, education, and planning.
There is no way to be totally prepared for an earthquake, and there is no way to stop all of its damage. But having an earthquake plan can give you and your family confidence.
As we sat down as a family one evening and talked about all the things we might be concerned about should there be an earthquake or should we lose our home in a fire.
Well, I think it's really important for kids to have already had a plan put into place for emergencies or disasters. And the most effective thing that I've seen in the experience recently with this disaster is that kids had already had earthquake training. So they knew that when the earthquake struck, that they had a certain plan that they needed to act out. And in the classrooms, kids have a duck and cover, which is reminiscent of the 50s, but they're doing it for earthquakes, which are very effective. This is a really good time to send home information from schools on how to set up an emergency plan in your home.
To summarize, your basic earthquake family plan should include finding the safe places to be at home or work, eliminating hazards or things that could fall during a quake, agreeing on a meeting place where the family can gather if they are separated, and having earthquake supplies ready in a place that is easy to get to.
Altered level of consciousness.
An earthquake may last only 15 seconds. Probably the safest place to be during an earthquake is in an open field away from buildings and coastal areas. But there is usually little choice on where you'll be during an earthquake. If you happen to be driving in a car, slow down and find a safe place to pull over away from buildings, power lines, street lamps, or bridges. And if you're on a bridge or overpass, try to slowly get off, then pull over to safety. If you are at home or work, find a safe place to ride it out
We were in the hallway. We had been doing some things in the hallway, which turned out to be the safest place in the house, which normally is.
If you can't visualize yourself of what is a safe area, call your building department or some agency like the volunteer services, and we will show you safe places. Some of them are a stairway, an interior stairway in your house. Closets are usually safe. Bathrooms are usually safe. But you want to stay away from areas where articles and appliances and that can go flying across the room.
One of the mistakes I saw made was like people in shopping centers in a mall getting excited when the initial wave comes. They don't duck and cover. Instead, they run for the outside. And I've seen many cases of people running outside and then plate glass from 2-3 stores or even higher coming down and either injuring them, cutting them badly, or taking them out altogether. It's a dangerous place to be outside tall buildings.
My 16-year-old was on his way to the high school with 2 other friends, and as they came to a stop, the earthquake happened, or it was started to shake. They pulled over to the side, and portions of the building, which is stick brooms, fell on top of their car.
In tall buildings and stores, stay away from glass or displays that could fall on you. Know where emergency exits are. Don't use elevators, and wait until the shaking stops before going outside.
When we were outside, the car was moving a lot, and then we got all scared because we seen all the houses all trashed up.
If you have children with you, they have some special needs.
Working with the children to get their fears out in the open and to work through the problems that may be associated with going through the earthquake.
And my daughter's biggest fear was to be in the house, and lo and behold, she was in the house, right across from in the living room where we had TVs and VCRs and so forth fall to the ground at her feet. The walls cracked. She was terrified. I was outside. I came running into the house, and she just was pale, cool, and diaphoretic. And she hadn't even realized yet what had gone on. As soon as I got there, she started crying. We went outside, and she was not entering the house again. She informed us that I'm never going back into the house, and I just want to be out in the yard.
After the ground stops shaking, then it's time for people to go into action. The injured are our top priority.
When I arrived at the hospital, we were coming down the road, and we saw that there was, it looked like a couple hundred people out on the front lawns. There was a lot of people in hospital uniforms, nurses, doctors. The ambulances were starting to line up there. They were all coming in code 3 with red lights and leaving them on, unloading patients already. And out on the grass, as I pulled up, I realized it wasn't just hospital staff. They were pulling patients out of the hospital, but the community was also starting to bring in their own patients. They weren't waiting for the ambulance to come pick them up. They realized that our system would be overwhelmed, as we've tried to get across and to the public, is they need to be prepared to take care of themselves.
There was patients within 10 minutes arriving of different degree of injuries, from lacerations, from chest pains, a lady who had gone into premature labor, and and we didn't have room to put these people in.
We come out in our yard, and my neighbor next door couldn't get over, so I went to check him. They carried him to my front yard. The lady down below came up bleeding, and she had 24 stitches. They found it later on in her arm. So we had to crawl back in the house to get blankets because the lady was going into shock. And some man driving by was excellent at first aid. He wrapped her arm, and we put towels out.
Aftershocks can cause even more damage.
Concern is we can still have. We've had like over 1,400 aftershocks now, and some of them at 5.0 or bigger. So a lot of the damages we're looking at are contributed to the aftershocks, and that will continue according to the geologists.
We're still feeling aftershocks since, and here's the 10th day from the initial earthquake. And on Wednesday night, we were feeling them like you could time them, every 15, 20 minutes during the night. You could almost know it's been 20 minutes, here comes another one, and you feel it. And they were of large magnitude. One was 4.8, one was 3.5. I mean, they weren't just little rolling aftershocks. They were felt. They woke you up. You sat up and you were ready to go out the door.
I saw a lot of black smoke on my way in because it was at 5 o'clock and there was a lot of traffic on the road, and it took me a while to get here. So I went through a lot of back streets, and when I got here, there was kind of, unraveling. People weren't too sure what to do. The phones were ringing off, but we were limited in what we do. We only had 2 guys here at one time. 2 guys can't really do too much, and so we just waited. Then a little bit after that, we got dispatched to a fire at Patola Heights. It's a mobile home park.
Fires often cause more damage than the actual earthquake.
We had a totally involved mobile home, and I told the guy charge the line. There was no water in the lines at all, in the hydrants. And I go, okay, what do we do now? Luckily, Danny, he saw a water tanker. He waved down the water tanker, and the water tanker saved us. We lost 1 mobile home there, and we had damaged 2 other structures there.
It may be up to you to control gas, electricity, and sparks that could cause fires.
We had a lot of mains open, and the first objective was to get them all turned off before power started coming back to the area.
If you do have a gas leak or you suspect a gas leak, turn off your gas, turn off your electricity, and just wait. Don't turn them back on by yourself. Wait for PG&E to do it, because you don't know if there's a short somewhere by the shock wave that went through your house or whatever.
When the quake hit, it was obviously 10-15 minutes later what type of damage you had and if you had any injuries. Being prepared has saved a lot of people a lot of grief by having water available, batteries for flashlights, all your basic staple concerns, crescent wrenches ready to turn off their gas mains. Those that had all this ready, we've hardly had any contact with them at all.
Cars and electrical switches can also throw off sparks that can cause fires. Sewage and water lines may also be damaged.
When we're thinking about water sources, we've got like the water in our canned foods, in our ice cube trays, the back of the toilet, but one of our main sources of water would be here at the hot water heater. What we want to first do is shut the system down. We've got 30 gallons here, but we want to shut it down to keep contaminated water from coming in. Then we'll take and don't stand away from here, but you'll want to release the pressure. And then down here at the bottom is the vent. We can hook a hose up to it and turn this on. As you can see, it'll allow the water to come out. And as long as we don't let dirty, contaminated water come in, we've got this water to use.
There are some other members of the family to be concerned about.
Also, you should not neglect your pets. Have some pet food or what have you, so their needs are taken care of. During an earthquake, most animals seem to be smarter than us, because a few minutes before it happens, they take off and then they disappear. But when they come back, and they do come back, you need to have something to feed them and what have you.
Pets are also frightened, so they need to be approached with caution and reassurance. After the earthquake, you could be on your own for several days, since emergency crews will be tied up, and stores and services may just not be available like they were before.
There was lines and lines of people wanting the same thing I wanted. And, they wanted batteries, flashlights, water, and, any other provisions they could get.
And food, the first day, you can forget about getting food, because the grocery stores just were totally destroyed. A lot of stuff was just all over the floor. They didn't want to allow people in.
Oh, God, it's really scary, but I'll tell you something. I'm prepared next time, because I'm going to get myself water and batteries and candles and everything I could get ready up the door. It's really something. Tents, especially tents, because you don't know what kind of weather we're going to be having.
Being prepared means having all the items you need together in an earthquake emergency kit before you need them.
What we've done here is we've put together a list, and we're thinking about all the things we might want to have if there were a disaster and we couldn't get into the house, or we had problems, couldn't go to the store. And so what we're doing is we're going to check off everything that we can to make sure we have all the supplies we want. We're going to take them, put them in the barrels, and we'll store them in the garage in a safe place, and be able to have them there.
Okay.
First of all, we want water, right?
Right.
They say you should have about 2 quarts to a gallon per person per day. And so we've got a bunch, but we might need a little bit more. We probably ought to be planning on about 3 to 7 days.
Okay.
How about we do the food? Okay, we'll hand it to you and you put it in. Let's go ahead and put all the canned goods in first. Here you go, honey. Put the peaches and fruits. Try and keep them together so that they're not all mixed up.
Chili beans. Coffee. Food for the cats.
Keep this all together.
And the dogs.
And we'll go ahead and get started with the other can with all our dry goods and stuff like batteries and things. Mom, why don't I call them out and you get them? Want the batteries and the radio, extra flashlight. Let's get the stove in there too, honey. Here's some of the stuff like the toothbrushes and matches and shaving stuff. Go ahead and put that in.
This at the bottom.
Yeah, put that in real where it's not going to tip over.
Garbage bags. Foil. Paper plates.
Okay, I think that's just about it, except for the tent, sleeping bag, and cooking kit. Can you grab those and get those in? And I'll go back over the list. I want to leave some room for the first aid kit, and we'll put that in at the top so we can get to it easy.
People should probably just keep a basic first aid kit around, and they should keep extra medications around. Major problems we've been having today is people can't get into their house and get to medications that they were previously on. So patients that have heart disease and lung disease can't get to the medications, and they come in with the same symptoms that they've had all along, but now it's worse. Plus they're anxious with everything. So maybe something they could do is keep extra medication in their car, their doctor's phone number handy so that they can call in new prescriptions.
What we'll do is we'll go ahead and put this in our storage, and so we'll have it all the time, and then we'll have our regular first aid kit for home use, but this way we'll always have something. So why don't you go ahead and take and put this in.
The whole kit should be stored in a place that will be safe during an earthquake and where you can easily get to it.
In a safe place. How's that?
The emergency situation continues once the shaking stops.
Stay off the roads. It's probably the key thing, is staying off the roads in an emergency, for the emergency equipment to get there from point A to point B, because there was a lot of traffic.
Most areas have an emergency radio broadcast going on. Now, whether it's a bilingual broadcast, I don't know. I think it should be, in this area, should be a bilingual broadcast so that everyone is able to understand what is happening, what the government is doing to if you have to evacuate, then you should, be able to listen to these broadcasts.
It is hard to telephone in or out of a quake zone, but when the lines do clear, have one person designated as your out-of-town contact. Call that person. Then they can call other friends and family members to let them know that you are okay. Cellular phones, CBs, and shortwave radios are some other ways to reach the outside world. Neighbors can become friends during a crisis like an earthquake.
I feel personally that the most important aspect after a tragedy of this size is knowing your neighbors. I mean, they're the first people that you turn to, like giving a neighbor a key of that kind. For example, I was away, and the neighbors came and turned the gas and turned the water off, and prepared me when I came back to the neighborhood.
It looked like it might rain when we were taking the furniture out, and we must have had anywhere from 10 to 20 people came in, family plus all our neighbors, and it was kind of neat.
It can be part of your earthquake plan to know your neighbors before the emergency hits. Where your house is and how it is built will help determine if you have a home to come home to after the earthquake is over.
I think that people would be much more sensitive to soil's requirements after an earthquake.
Certainly where we are on hard bedrock, it responds very differently than when we are on water-saturated sediments. And the heavy damage in past earthquakes in places like Santa Cruz, Watsonville, the downtown area of San Francisco and Oakland along the waterfront were built on thick bay muds. And maybe the best analogy comparing that and bedrock is to hit a steel plate and watch how it vibrates versus hitting a waterbed and watching how it vibrates. And it's that kind of thing that goes on in these waterfront areas, which is why we probably saw the extensive damage we did. The Uniform Building Code isn't adequate in areas of high seismic activity. In other words, we've seen places that simply did not survive the intense shaking. We need to upgrade that.
They're not strong enough to resist the giant earthquake or the big one. The codes are reevaluated and updated periodically. So each time we have an earthquake, there'll be modifications made to the codes.
History shows that the most dangerous building in earthquake country is unreinforced masonry. This includes buildings made of brick, blocks, or stone with mortar, but without steel reinforcement. Chimneys also fall into that category.
Most of your masonry chimneys on the older structures here have failed. Even some of the new ones have failed.
Requirements for fireplaces have changed dramatically as we've gone through the last 60 years with model codes and earthquakes in California, to the point now where we went and did a survey of our town, and fireplaces that have been built in the last few years did fine. That's something people need to look at.
A basic wood frame house is probably one of the safest buildings in an earthquake. But many of them, built before the 1950s, were not tied down to their foundations, so they have a tendency to slide right off during a quake. A house can be retrofitted with anchor bolts securing the floor and walls to the foundation. Besides having a firm foundation, there should also be strong support in the rest of the house. Simple plywood sheets can be a miracle material that will give that extra support. Sheer panels or sheer walls help hold up a house and keep it from toppling like a row of dominoes. Metal braces attached to joints or beams keep them from acting like hinges. The combination of the sheer walls and the bracing help keep the building together during all the swaying. Preparing the inside of your house requires some common sense and a little detective work. Look around and try to imagine what would fall during an earthquake. A water heater should be tied down with metal straps or plumber's tape, then anchored to the studs of the wall. A flexible hose on the water heater will allow some movement without breaking off. Other large pieces of furniture like china cabinets or bookcases can be bolted to walls or floors. Thick carpeting can also help slow down sliding furniture. Remember that anything that can slide, fly, or spill probably will. Child-proof latches on kitchen cabinets and storage areas keep the contents inside instead of spilling and breaking onto the floor. Decorative items like vases and art objects can be fastened down to shelves with wax, rubberized glue, or even Velcro strips. Pictures or mirrors can jump right off hooks. This can be stopped by running the hanger wire through a screw eye that is firmly mounted into the wall. Now, even though your home and work environment are both prepared, there is no way to be mentally prepared for the psychological effects of an earthquake.
Since the earthquake took place, the family and myself have been sleeping out in the backyard for the last 3 days. It really doesn't matter how much money you have or how well-to-do you are. When an earthquake of this magnitude happens, it reduces everybody to the same level.
The first stage, most of the time, is denial. Maybe for a couple of days people will say, oh wow, this was really intense and I really had these horrible feelings. If you were directly affected, death, that sort of thing, you're going to go through those same stages of denial, grief, anger, loss that you do in any traumatic situation where you're losing something or you lose your sense of security or you lose your feeling that the earth is a stable and solid thing.
I tried to get my son to convince him to stay, for us to spend the night there at the house. He wouldn't. He refused. He was very anxious. He was very restless. He couldn't sit still. He had to keep moving. He was just very, very afraid.
We did end up moving out of the yard back into the house, but my wife, my daughter Janelle, and my 2-year-old and myself all sleep in the same room. We let her move in. She informed us she would never sleep in her bedroom again, and up to now we haven't pushed that.
One of the primary things that happens with kids is any things that are going on in their family, any traumas that they're already experiencing will just be intensified by something like a disaster, like an earthquake. The kids will start having gastrointestinal problems, diarrhea, vomiting, nervous stomachs, headaches. Those sorts of things will happen. They not only happen with kids, but they're going to be happening with adults too.
Realize what happens and talk to your family members about what happened. Explain to your kids. Just don't turn them off and say, it's over, don't worry about it. It's going to be a while until everybody settles down. After every aftershock that we'll get, people are going to be uneasy for a while. It may last 6 months, may last a year. And just be patient with your family members. Hug them once in a while.
With all the awful publicity the earthquakes have gotten, they keep saying, well, this is not the big one, it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to be the next 7 to 10 days, and it can happen anytime. And since the shakes or the aftershocks were still coming quite strong, I was a little bit hesitant about sending him to school, so I just kept him at home for my own reassurance, not for his.
One of the things in helping her deal with her fears has been the ability for my wife and I to get rid of that machismo thing or macho thing that I, as a guy, am apt to do, and talk about our fears. That earthquake scared me.
They can't just go on as if nothing happened. That a lot of us say we're going to go back to normal. After a disaster like this, you never forget it, and it's never back to something. And you have to sort of move on to how you incorporate it into your life and not be quiet about it. You have to talk about it. You have to let kids talk about it.
The emotional shakes may take a long time to heal, but being around people who care and getting back to day-to-day living helps replace the security that was lost when the ground shook and the world changed in a matter of seconds. Even though we can't accurately predict earthquakes or know exactly where they will strike, planning saves lives and property. You can personally be prepared by having drills at home and work. Take first aid classes. Find out about school and city disaster plans. Get more information from the Red Cross, the disaster information section of the telephone book, or your local library. Survival of the big one will depend on you.